Hey Dialogue listeners, I'm so excited to share that our show is now a Stitcher Premium affiliate. Wherever or however you listen to podcasts right now, I want you to take a moment and check out Stitcher. Those of you listening on Stitcher already, you understand why, but for those of you who don't know, Stitcher is a free podcast app for iPhone and Android users and home to 260,000 podcasts. You're going to find one you like, I promise. Stitcher also has smart recommendations like playlists, car mode, even a sleep timer. So the app is entirely free to use, but they also offer a premium subscription service called Stitcher Premium. There's exclusive bonus content, episodes from top shows, exclusive Stitcher shows, hosts doing extra things just for this subscription service, and lots of shows that are ad-free. You can get all of it for $4.99 a month. The best part is you can get 30 days for free right now. So, my suggestion during quarantine, try Stitcher Premium. All you have to do is go to stitcher.com/premium to sign up today. Use the promo code KILL, K-I-L-L. Get your first month free, and then you can cancel, but I have a feeling you're going to want to continue. Again, it's stitcher.com/premium, promo code KILL. Did you know that you can get ad-free episodes of My Favorite Murder on Stitcher Premium? Did you know you could get bonus episodes of True Crime Garage? That's what personally got me into Stitcher Premium. I have a feeling you're going to love it. And in this weird time that we're in, I'm finding I need to mix up my podcast rotation. I'm really drawn to kind of more lighthearted and comedy stuff right now. They have hundreds, if not thousands, of comedy podcasts, straight up like stand-up comedy in the Stitcher Premium subscription program. I'm here for it. I'm trying all of them. Tons of fun and frankly, great diversion. So join me by helping Dialogue and opening up a world of bonus content for yourselves by going to stitcher.com/premium, enter the code KILL, and start listening. Hey diehards, it's Rebecca Sebastian, and you're listening to Dialogue, a true crime conversation. I'm so excited about today's episode. If you're listening on release day, it's May 6th, Wednesday. In just a few days, it's going to be Mother's Day. I know Mother's Day can be complicated for people, but I hope that if you're a mom, you get to feel celebrated and loved this weekend. And I know there's so many of you women who care for people like mothers who are not related to you, and I hope you too feel the love on that day. There's not going to be much brunching outside of the home, not maybe the most extravagant Mother's Day we've ever had, but I hope you're with people you love, or you at least get to connect with people you love. And speaking of Mother's Day, I had an idea, more than 6 months ago, to have my guests come on and to have the episode line up with Mother's Day. And I was actually quite impressed with myself to invite them so early. I invited them back in September and they said yes. And then fast forward 6 months in a pandemic later, and all of a sudden it was like in a couple of weeks, reached out to my guests. Hey, remember how I said you would be on for Mother's Day? Will you still do it? Of course, they were amazingly gracious and said, yeah, we will. And I was hoping to meet them at CrimeCon last weekend, where we may have recorded in person, but alas, that was not to happen. So we connected over the phone, and my guests today, I chose to have on particularly this week because they are Melissa and Mandy of Moms and Murder. Moms and Murder is one of the podcasts that I got to listening right when my real true crime podcast obsession began. So it was like Serial, Generation Y, Moms and Murder. Those were kind of the early days for me. So I go back a ways with them, almost 3 years. And it's just honestly a thrill to have met them. I met them at CrimeCon last year, but then to have spent an hour plus on the phone with them, just getting to know them and feel like I'm experiencing what I hear them do with them, what I hear them do weekly on their show. It was wild, a little bit surreal, but they're as down-to-earth, lovely, funny, and kind as you think they are. And there's some surprises. If you've not listened to Moms and Murder, if for some reason you've never heard of the show, then you're going to get to know the hosts today. And I promise you're going to want to go listen to their show. And if you already know and love the show, like so many of you do, I think this is a really fun little peeling back of the layer to learn more about these women. Some fun things that came up in particular that I really can't stop thinking about are the enneagram. You know, I love to talk about the enneagram, and there's very few opportunities to do so. So we have a moment with that, and I tell a very anticlimactic Tony Hale story, which you don't want to miss, despite that setup. And you're going to find out which mom of Moms and Murders really doesn't want to have you on her podcast. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'll let them do the rest. Check out Moms and Murder if you haven't already. Thank you so much to Melissa and Mandy for the laughs and the great conversation. And also, it was 3 different phones, 3 different locations. There are a couple bumpy parts, vocally or audio-wise, but we did our best, and I hope you love this conversation. I am very grateful to them for killing the small talk. Last thing before I go, I am on this kind of very cool new platform called Get Vocal, GETVOKL, and I will be doing my Yellow Tape True Crime Trivia show there tomorrow night, May 7th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And I'm also just going to go on there periodically and talk dialogue. I thought it'd be really fun for me to meet some of you. We've Instagram messaged, and sometimes you guys email, but this is a fun way we could actually face-to-face connect. So I'm thinking of having some kind of post-dialogue conversation or chat. We'll figure that out. And I'm also doing Yellow Tape over there. So officially, I'm going to be on Thursday nights at 7 p.m. doing trivia, but I'm going to go on at other times too, and I want to find the right time for dialogue for a conversation there. So anyway, check out the platform Get Vocal. It is an app. It is free to use. Just make a profile, sign on, and you can connect with me there. And there's also a lot of other really fun true crime podcasters and creators on there already. So there's lots happening over there. So please join me on Get Vocal. As always, if you could leave a rating or review for Dialogue, I would so appreciate it. And you can keep up with the show and me on Twitter and Instagram at Dialogue Pod. Okay, enjoy my conversation with Melissa and Mandy of Moms and Murder. Okay, I am speaking with the moms themselves from Moms and Murder. It's Mandy and Melissa. Thank you so much for being on Dialogue.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I've been thinking about this a lot and how I think your podcast was one of my very first in my podcast rotation. I think there was Serial and then a few others that I still listen to. Generation Y was one, and yours. Mm-hmm. And so you're kind of like my fixtures in my podcast life. So meeting you last year before I even became a podcaster was very thrilling. And to kind of feel like I'm doing this now is a weird, I don't know if it's not full circle. It's something weirder, like an Inception, like I'm like crashing into your universe or something. But you guys started almost 3 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it really is.
I think it's crazy too.
Yeah, because I started in August and I feel like that's flown by. Like, how am I on episode 41 is not even, I can't even imagine. So yeah, talk to me, Mandy and Melissa. You're obviously friends. Your show, you have this camaraderie and a chemistry, but I'd love to hear the story of your friendship, how you got together and how it kind of transpired into Moms and Murder.
I think Melissa tells that story the best, so I will refer to her and let her tell the story of how we became friends. It's a story that we've told on our show a few times, and people seem to enjoy it. It is a funny story. So, Melissa, I will let you tell it.
Thank you so much. Well, Mandy and I, we both had our oldest two are pretty close in age. And then when our youngest two, who are her son's 7 and mine 6 now, when they were just newborn babies, we decided to join a mom's group. At some point, you realize like your older kids need somebody too. So, when it's one kid, it's a little bit easier, I
Yep.
think, because it's just you and them. But then when they're older, you're like, oh crap, now I have to entertain you too. So then we went to a mom's group. I don't know if I found it on Yahoo groups, or I don't remember where we found. Oh, Meetup. That's what it was, meetup.com or something. So we go to this mom's group, and everyone is very, it wasn't quite my group of people. They were very, very nice, but I was like, oh, without children, I would not get along with any of these people.
Uh-huh.
And and this little judgy girl walked by Mandy's car and said something like, oh, there's a lot of trash in your car, or your car's a mess, something like that. And I was like, who is that girl? Because that's who I need to be friends with. That's my kind of people, you know? And then just shooing that girl away from my car. But that's how we met at a mom's group. And that's how I was like, you know, beelined right for Mandy and was like, let's do this. You're forced to be my friend now.
Yeah. Isn't that always so comforting when you kind of know when you found your person in a weird scenario, when you're like, okay, good. Like I found someone I can be a little bit more myself with.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely it.
I feel like I'm always.
I mean, it worked out great. Yeah. Melissa and I both stopped going to the group shortly after we met each other. So
Oh, even better.
I don't know if that means that, I don't know if that means that we were just a really good match, or if it means that we both just had such a terrible experience that we didn't want to continue doing that anymore.
The moms groups are not for everybody. You know, they each have their own flavor.
Yeah.
And if you don't find the right one, it's just not necessarily a fit. And I've come to peace with that. And that's totally fine. I'm laughing because I've been a mom so many years. It's kind of ridiculous. But my first mom group experience, so I had my first child at age 20. So I was really young and I looked even younger than I was. So I walked into a mom's group and I decided that I was going to just lie about my age. I was going to make myself sound older and more mature. So I told everyone I was 24 because in a 20-year-old's mind, that's like, you know, peak adulthood or something. And I just look, yeah, exactly. I look back on it now and I'm like, how embarrassing, because those are the same ages. Like this was in New York City. So most of the women were 35 and 40 years old. So they were just like, oh, you're a joke no matter what. And I ended up becoming very good friends with one of the women. And then my birthday came around and she's like, we have to go out for your birthday. I'm like, oh shit, I'm only turning 21. And I had to tell her, and it was a big thing. But anyway, so moms groups, I get it. I don't always find my people there, but I did find one. Okay, so you have this connection, and then how soon do you both kind of have the true crime connection come out? Does that come up pretty quickly?
It was a while, right? I mean, it was
a while.
Years.
I would say it was at least like 2 years into our friendship when we kind of started talking just casually about, I don't know, you know, Melissa loves watching different things on TV, and it just came up in conversation that she watched Dateline or something like that. And it was just one of those things where I was like, oh yeah, I'm into that too. And it kind of just went from there. And then we would just have random talks about different crime cases that we were interested in. And then one day Melissa just said, hey, like, we both like this thing. How would you feel about doing a podcast? And I was a little taken aback because I didn't even listen to podcasts at the time and didn't really know what it was all about. But Melissa did listen to a lot of true crime podcasts at the time, and she had her favorites, and she thought that it was something that we, you know, might have fun doing. So I just agreed to try it out for her. I wasn't really sure how it was going to go, and that's kind of the story of our podcast. But yeah, there was really no real like plan of how the show was going to unfold or how we were going to do anything. It kind of just developed naturally, with me having no experience with podcasts. And then at least with Melissa, she at least did have some kind of knowledge of how true crime podcasts work. So it kind of, thankfully for her, I feel like it worked out okay, but it could have been really terrible with me not having any clue what I was doing.
No, it sounds like the right mix. Go ahead, Melissa.
Oh yeah, no, I was going to say, we cannot emphasize how little we put into like thinking it through. It was just like, do you want to do this? Okay. And Mandy's like such a good friend that like goes along with like ideas. I'm not the friend that does that, but Mandy does. Thank goodness. Because if the roles were reversed, I'd probably be like, we really should think this out, and we should really, you know, I'm very that kind of a personality. Right. But she's like, sure, I'm up for it. And that's just how it started. And with her confidence going into it, it was perfect. That's all I needed. We could do it. I don't know what we were thinking, but
Sometimes it's the best way to start something. I think if you wait to figure it out or think it through or strategize too much, you can kind of go into that like paralyzed mode where you're never ready to like pull the trigger. So you probably did it the right
yeah,
way. So this was probably 2017. Is that right?
yeah.
So it
Wow,
wasn't
that's
like,
crazy.
I know it is crazy. It's sounding further and further away. It wasn't like podcasts were brand new. They definitely weren't, but they also weren't what they are now. I mean, there are so many, it feels like a new true crime podcast pops up every day. So back then, 3 years ago, like what were you listening to, Melissa, that kind of got you in the headspace and you understood that world a little bit? What were you listening to?
I listened to some comedy ones, but then I started on, of course, Serial, and then that got me to Generation Y,
Yep.
and then so that was kind of like the natural progression for me. And so then you'd find all these like one-offs, or not one-offs, I should say, like these serialized ones where it's just covering one case for a while, and then you
Right.
have Undisclosed and all this stuff. So that's kind of where it went, but I didn't hear anything that, like, I loved all of those, but I didn't hear anything that I felt like I could do or that we could do until we kind of got together and did it and realized, like, you know what, we can kind of do what we want. That was the nice thing. It was, we can make a show we want to hear. And that's, I love all those shows, but for different reasons than why we make our show the way we make our show, you know?
Exactly. Yes, there's so much room, I think, for, these different
Hmm.
elements and structures, and that's probably a lot of the success of your show is it was something different that people hadn't heard at that point. But let's go back a little bit further. Um, I'll let you choose who goes first, but where did the true crime interest and, when did that capture your imaginations
Go
originally?
ahead, Mandy.
So I think the first time I was thinking about this earlier today about when I can pinpoint a specific time that I was really interested in true crime. And I really think it was when the John Benet Ramsey case was going on. I was only 9 years old at the time, but I remember even for being 9 years old, I remember seeing it on the news and listening to different people talk about it and thinking that it was really interesting, even though I was really young and didn't have, of course, there was no internet access. I wasn't, looking on the internet and going down rabbit holes when I was 9 years old, but I still thought it was interesting. And so even at that early of an age, there was something about this particular crime story that really fascinated me. And even though, of course, my mom didn't really want me watching the news coverage of this because of the type of story, that it was a terrible, terrible story. So I wasn't really allowed, but I would, if it came on the news or anything, updates came on, I would just kind of like put my ear over there, and try to pay attention and listen and try to gather the information I could. At the time, I didn't really understand the gravity of that crime until I got much older and started doing more research on the case myself. And then, you kind of go from there and it spirals. But I think as early as age 9 to 10 is really when my true crime interest kind of came out. And then I started discovering shows like Unsolved Mysteries and all those older school ones that we all kind of grew up with. And it kind of just went from there. And I've always been fascinated with it. And I've always had a love for like the horror and crime genre as a whole. And so I like scary movies, and I'm really interested in real life scary stories and things like that. But yeah, very early for me.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I wonder if, a kidnapping story, when you hear that and you're a child, well, it was positioned as a kidnapping story. We can
Right.
talk about our theories later, but I wonder, certain kids how they process that. And for you, it was like a curiosity to know more, whereas some might go into kind of freak out mode. You wanted to know more. So that's very
Right.
interesting. And I totally relate. Melissa, what about you?
Similarly, that's a hard word to say. I grew up with my dad, especially like Saturday nights were Cops and America's Most Wanted.
Oh my
Like that was
gosh,
just
us too.
right. That's your Saturday nights. And then you have Rescue 911 and all these offshoots
Yes.
and stuff like that. But that's all that played in our house. Like those are the shows, that and Andy Griffith is all I really remember watching at our house. And so I feel like I always kind of, it was just always there. But then I specifically remember, of course, OJ Simpson. And when, the car chase happened, we had like relatives visiting. And I remember we were just sitting and watching the TV. And I remember when the verdict came in and they told us about it in school, like our science teacher talked to us about it. It was just a huge deal. And then kind of realizing that it's a huge deal, something that happened all the way in California was affecting my life in Florida, that everyone was talking about it. And even as a kid had like theories of what was going on. It was super fascinating to me and terrible. And then, you didn't know what to think. And
Right.
then we didn't have, the internet. I feel so old every time we say like we didn't have the internet. I'm
Yeah.
sure it was around, but like rich kids had it or something, so we didn't have it. And so you couldn't look these things up and just kind of like go down these rabbit holes, like Mandy was saying. It was just kind of like whatever was on the news that day is all you got, but you like ate it up because that's
Yeah.
all you had.
Yeah, and if you were lucky enough to have the internet, it would take 20 minutes to like get connected. So who really was?
Yeah.
Few of us had that kind of patience either. So really interesting to me because I feel like for John Bonet definitely and OJ, there are these moments, especially the OJ verdict, where almost everyone can remember, everyone who was born, which is insane because
Right.
there are listeners who weren't or who were babies, but you can remember where you were, and they become these defining cultural moments. Looking
Right.
back, what do you think it was about those particular cases? Or maybe like the Big Ten, as I like to call them, like the ones kind of we all know, like the Menendez brothers, Casey Anthony, Jodi
Mhm.
Arias, these certain ones. Like, why do you think they are the ones that we've all managed to retain and have this like cultural gravity around them?
That's a very good question. Mandy, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do actually have some thoughts on that. I feel like a lot of the times the cases that really stand out and become these landmark cases, it's because they have some element about them that is just truly awful and horrible. And as much as it sounds like, well, then why would people want to consume that? But that's what people like to learn about, and not necessarily in like it's almost like a morbid curiosity kind of, but it's like if you think about these cases, like you mentioned Casey Anthony and Jodi Arias, and it's like you think about the circumstances surrounding these cases, and they're just so unbelievable that these things happened. And I think people are really fascinated by things that are what they perceive to be unbelievable, and they want to know more. Like, how does this happen? How is it possible that this would happen? And I think that curiosity is what really drives people to focus on specific cases more than others when, some others, not that they're less important, but maybe the facts are just the facts and they're cut and dry and that's just how it happened. And then with other cases, there's a lot more questions. You don't really understand what exactly happened, and the desire to know more is kind of what keeps these cases in the news and keeps people talking about them and keeps people interested. So I think that might have a lot to do with kind of some of these really big ones that you hear about and that people remember and they stand out.
That's a good point. They're not mundane, and they're probably pretty rare in terms of frequency and how they occur. Like these are not, yes, people are killed pretty often and there are murders, but they don't always have those surrounding details I think you're kind of pointing to. So that's a good thought. Melissa, don't want to put you on the spot, but any ideas or thoughts on those cases and why they've kind of stayed the staying power that they have?
Um, Similar to Mandy, I do think that they do have these like everything was normal at this house, and you're like, okay, this is a normal, what we think of as a normal family, whatever, it's cookie cutter looking family, and then all of a sudden it's like, but there was a secret, and that secret is so crazy, and you just can't even believe, these things are happening. The Menendez brothers, all the, abuse that they suffered and stuff, you just didn't know. And then that comes to light, it just kind of takes this story that seems pretty cut and dry at first, at least. And then there's like the Jodi Arias story where it's like there's photographs right before he's killed. There's, there's audio, there's all kinds of stuff where you're like, how is this even there? Like, how did this happen? And it doesn't make sense. And I think we get kind of obsessed with it. And especially now that you have access to so much information and you can look at their Facebook pages and you can, find their friends and, all this stuff. And you can go as deep as you want to and stuff. I think that, back years ago, it would just be this crime and that's all everyone focused on. So you kind of didn't have a choice. I don't know exactly why. I think they were just like the OJ Simpson one, obviously he was famous and, you know, what exactly happened there. But then I feel like I'm talking in a circle now, but I feel like
No.
that's like what the news, that's all we really had were these big stories. And I feel like if the news got any kind of reaction from people, they were like, well, this is what we're doing now. Like Nancy Grace and Casey Anthony, Top Mom, that was shoved down our throats for years, I feel like, especially living in Central Florida. That's
Yeah.
all we heard about around the clock.
Right.
And being here, you can drive to the neighborhood they live in. I didn't do that, but you can do that. And you can drive to where she left her car. You can see all this stuff. So it's just kind of in your brain, in your forefront. And it's being pushed that way a lot of times.
Yeah, you bring up something interesting, and it's driving by their house. And I'm sure little Kaylee's memorial, they often show that a lot too. I bet people know where that is in Florida.
Right.
So I think our interest in true crime, we've all accepted as pretty normal now. It's pretty mainstream. It is morbid curiosity, like you were saying, Melissa, or Mandy, I'm sorry. It probably comes out of that, but we all have that a little bit. It's not that weird. Where do you think the line is? Like, what do you think about going to the Ramsey house if you're in Boulder, Colorado, or the Anthony's house, or the mansion, Nicole Brown Simpson's house on Bundy Drive or whatever it was? Like, what's your comfort level with that kind of thing within the true crime genre?
For me personally, I am not interested in doing any of that. It's real people, it's their real lives, it's these horrible things that have happened to them, and they're trying to live their lives, right? So it's almost like this weird memorial that we're not a part of, that we want to be a part of, like you want to feel this way. I had a friend who actually was neighbors with Casey Anthony. So she would tell me, we worked at near the hospital together, and she would just say, people are just parking in our yards all the time. The news is there, and it's just harassing these people, even people outside of the, immediate family or, that have this going on. It's affecting so many more people. So especially when I saw that going on and it being here, it just felt like, read about it, whatever, but I don't understand that step. I don't understand that. But I mean, people think differently, so I'm not saying my way is right. I don't get that. It doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah, that's your line, your threshold.
Right.
I'm with you on that. I wonder, just because the genre is big and it's always getting bigger, I'll sometimes see people who kind of, they wear a serial killer t-shirt or something, or I see some products with things and I'm just like, oh, okay. And I forget that there's that too within this world.
Right.
Because I tend to feel the way you do about it, that I understand kind of the connection to the case, and you feel in a weird way involved or connected because of your deep knowledge of it or interest in it or even empathy for the family. But to insert yourself, into the story in a physical location is kind of, to me, it's like a boundary thing. And then that serial killer obsession stuff is like not my thing either. So that exists too, and that's okay because it's big. We're all different people with different thresholds, but I always like to kind of think about and ask people what their feelings are on it and how they then look at true crime. And you guys are creators. So what was cool to hear you talk about earlier was you wanted to create this show the way you wanted it to sound and feel and look. So maybe now would be a nice time to talk about, now you didn't plan a lot necessarily, you planned your cases, but you kind of just turned the mics on and were like, we're going to talk about a case together. Now you probably have enough years behind you and you can kind of think about it. What were you trying to create, and how would you describe your show? Let's pretend somebody has never heard it. And I know you guys have tons of listeners, but let's pretend people haven't heard it. How would you describe Moms and Murder?
Mandy, you always do a great job.
Yeah. So I think when we first started, I think, and Melissa and I have talked about this before, but she had maybe a little bit different of a vision for the show than what we currently have brought it to now. And that's fine. I think originally maybe we were thinking a lot more serious and just kind of delivering the facts and maybe having a little conversation, but not necessarily the way that our show is now, where we have a little bit more of a lighter tone, and we have these segments in the beginning and the end that are kind of just meant to break up this terrible crime story that we're talking about. And so I feel like now it seems like what we do, which we've always kind of referred to as true crime light, it seems to be kind of gaining popularity, and people seem to enjoy hearing stories from a perspective that they can personally relate to on some level. And so we get a lot of our listeners that write to us or leave us reviews, and they say that one thing they appreciate is the tone, and it sounds like they're hanging out with their friends and hearing a crime story. And that seems to really resonate with a lot of people, more so than just sitting down and listening to, I mean, and I love Dateline, but I could fall asleep to Dateline. You know, sometimes it doesn't always capture my attention in that way, not like it would listening to a podcast with two hosts that I relate to or that I enjoy listening to them speaking. And then I'm a lot more engaged in that show. So I feel like that's kind of, I don't even remember what the question was anymore. That's how we kind of ended up there.
Well, you nailed it. You did. Like, I was just curious about and I probably asked 6 questions at once, which is something I've been known to do. Just how you formed the show and what the vision was and kind of how it unfolded. And you answered that perfectly. It's interesting that you sort of set out with a different intention, that it was going to look a little different than it does. That adjustment, how kind of soon did that happen? And was it because of the way you guys were feeling after the show, or was it more informed by listeners and feedback, or some combination?
I think it happened immediately on the first episode. We realized very quickly when we started recording that this was going to be something maybe different than what we had originally had in mind. You know, once it's all, you know, it's fine to try and plan and to kind of organize things in your mind for how you're going to do a podcast. But until you turn on the microphones and actually start talking with each other, you don't really know how it's going to come across or how it's going to sound. So I feel like it was pretty much instantly that we realized, like, okay, we need to kind of just embrace like what we are doing with the chemistry that we have and our friendship, and kind of take that angle a little bit more than trying to force something that really neither one of us, you know, I didn't want to force being overly serious or something that didn't feel sincere, you know, to me. I wanted to just be free to be able to speak about these topics in the way that I would, you know, and not have to kind of put on a show, I guess, which is a terrible thing to say because that's exactly what we're doing. But you know what I mean? I didn't want to, I think we just both realized right away that it was just not going to be how we originally thought. And we just kind of went with it and rolled with it. And it kept evolving over the years. I think now we're in a place where we've pretty much done the show the same way for a while, but we had a long time where it just kept changing, and we kept coming up with different ideas for how we were going to do things, and even how the show's notes or scripts were going to be written out. And a lot of that's changed, but now I feel like we've kind of gotten into a little bit more of a groove with it. And the way the show is now, I feel like I don't really see it changing. It could, but I think now we're both comfortable with the show that we do, and we enjoy the show that we do.
I enjoy the show. You do too. That is so cool to hear, actually, that you kind of recognize this thing as maybe this isn't 100% us, and then you just adjusted and kept going. I think that's encouraging to me as a podcaster. And it isn't to say that it was wrong or bad or wasn't working, but have you ever watched a show you've loved and then years go by and you watch the pilot episode and you're like, oh yeah, this is a trash show? And I'm not talking about your early podcast episodes. I'm literally thinking in my mind about Friends. I'm thinking about Friends. Like the first couple episodes, I'm like, they really all seem like new actors who haven't found their groove yet, who aren't like super confident, and the show was not, the characters weren't developed, and the script was wonky. And I think I hear a lot of podcasters say, like, the early show, you know, the episodes are just, they're an evolution. Like they are what they are, and then they kind of morph and become what they become, which kind of makes sense and kind of doesn't. But that's cool. I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad to hear you guys have found something that feels really right for you both, because you're different. You have a great chemistry and you work together well, but you're both very different, kind of your demeanor. So you've sort of both found a place to shine within the show, which is very evident when you listen to it.
I like that.
Oh, well, I can write that and put that somewhere.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sure. So I was thinking about your show and about, you know, it's called Moms and Murders. You're both mothers. And so I would imagine a lot of your audience is women, which is a lot of the true crime audience naturally. And I would imagine a lot are moms. And, you know, you probably accompany women on their day, whether they're commuting to work or home with kids or whatever it is. But women and true crime and podcasting, I guess, comes up a lot on Dialogue. And so I was wondering if I could hear your thoughts on if you have them, I have had guests recently been like, I don't know why women like it more, but I don't also feel the need to wonder why. And I'm like, oh, that's fair. I sit here and ponder it all the time. But do you have thoughts on that? And is that true? Is my assumption about your audience correct?
Yes, your assumption is definitely true. It's mostly, I would say, moms, definitely mostly women for sure. But I think that whenever I've thought about this, because I've wondered too, I'm like, how are all of us like consuming so much true crime when a lot of it is focused on women? And, a lot of what we've talked about, especially early on, we did a lot more like husband and wife, and the husband kills the wife. And we've tried to definitely mix it up a lot more. But like, why am I fascinated by this? I don't know. And I've thought about like, it is like this weird, Josh Mankiewicz from Dateline had said before, people like watching Dateline because there's a story and then there's a conclusion. So you kind of have this, you have this storytelling and these twists and turns, and then there's justice typically at the end of the episode. I want to hear what happens and what somebody's done and what they did in certain situations. Like I don't know how familiar you are with the Enneagram, and I have to stop talking about it.
We could just only talk about the Enneagram. No one will ever talk about it with me.
I'm a 6. I'm a big time 6. So I am always thinking of the million ways I can die at every single moment of the day. I'm always worried about, everything happening. And so I'm kind of living my life, through that lens, I guess.
Yeah.
And so for me, watching true crime and listening to true crime is like putting a puzzle together, almost like, okay, well, in this situation, this happened and this person did this. And okay, well, that's one thing to think about. Like, I'm just constantly going through worst case scenarios in my head. And so it's just this weird thing where it like calms me in a way where I can think things through, and it's not weird to listen to it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it outside of true crime, it is weird to say, I think about terrible things happening to me and my family all day long. But within true crime, I've kind of like, it is a weird soothing technique for me, which sounds crazy, but I know other people feel the same way, where you can watch Dateline and fall asleep. It soothes you to sleep. I don't understand it, but that's where I'm at.
I don't entirely either, but I relate to it. I think there's a self-protection aspect, like maybe I'll glean just the little bit of knowledge that I need to, defend my own life someday. I think there's that. And some of us, are just wired to want to know all those details and kind of maybe a little bit obsessively. Mandy, what about you? And do you know your Enneagram number?
Melissa, what is my Enneagram number?
Oh, this is amazing.
She's the YOLO one. Which one's the YOLO?
7.
Either 5 or 7. Yeah, she's a 7.
She's a 7. Yeah, my youngest is a 7. That makes sense, because you were like, yeah, sure, I'll start a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh,
exactly.
I like this insight. Okay, so wait, we were talking about Enneagram, but before that, women and true crime, Mandy. What do you think that connection comes down to?
Yeah, so, this question always comes up. I feel like this has definitely been asked of us even before, what our opinion is on women in true crime. And I really think at the end of the day, for me, I think for a lot of women, they just connect with these stories on a deeper level, because I feel like women really are the targets of violent crime a lot more often. And so in that way, it is almost like Melissa said, the more of this that we consume and we take in and we learn more about how these situations unfold, how these women get into certain situations and end up having something terrible happen, well, the more that we learn about that, then you do have a sense of security. Like, I now have heard of a story where this happened, so I'm not going to let that exact thing happen to me, because now I know how that happened to somebody else. And so now I can have that knowledge to keep myself safer. And so I do think it kind of comes back to that a little bit. And I just think women in general have more of an emotional connection to terrible stories. And of course, I'm sure men don't like crime stories either, but I'm not saying anything that men are just like, they don't care about crimes, but I feel like women in general have a more emotional response to everything. And that's just kind of how it is. And so, and for me, there are certain cases that I get really, really invested in. And I've told Melissa, and I don't know what it is. I can't pinpoint a specific thing, but it's like sometimes when I'm working on episodes for the show, it's like I can just get them done really quickly. I'm very interested, and it just the time flies by and I get the whole episode done. And then sometimes it takes me a little longer because I don't have quite the same personal connection to it. So I really don't know, but I do just feel like women they use the information that they glean from these stories to kind of carry with them in the rest of their lives and take with them every day to protect themselves.
It's almost a false sense of security, though. Like, that's how I feel when I think about it. I'm like, it's a false sense of security to think that even I could, look at the situation and I have, okay, this is what I would do in this situation. Not, obviously you just don't know. You're just running through scenarios. If you're somebody like me who's running through scenarios in your mind, it gives you a false sense of security to think, okay, here's my options and here's things that have happened. I was so excited about bike riding, and then I found out the other day that somebody had been murdered while riding their bike, and I was like, great. I thought that was just, but you know what I mean? Like, I didn't think that was an option. And so then I'm thinking, oh gosh, now I have to think about all the bike riding murders and figure out, is it because you take, I don't know. There's just some weird wiring in my brain, at least. I can only speak for me, not Mandy. Her brain seems to be much better wired, but we just don't exactly know. I don't even remember the question. I'm like, I don't know what's going on here, Rebecca. You're great. This is wonderful. But I sound like I've been in quarantine too long.
Well, we all have been, and we all do sound like that. So that's not just you, but I'm totally relating to everything you're both saying. I think you even said something earlier about like, maybe you said self-soothing. I don't know. Maybe I made that up. But I almost think that's what it is. We kind of deep down know we have no control over what may or may not happen to us. But perhaps some of these things we've learned and picked up along the way give us this sense of, well, perhaps this is a strategy or a coping mechanism that I might deploy if needed. It is a false sense of security. I think in real moments of grave danger, we don't know how we'll react. We like to think maybe we do, but it's the same thing like why I read a story and go, well, did they analyze the blood spatter? Like, I know anything about it. I just watch Law and Order, so it's the same sort of thing we apply, kind of all the things we learn from true crime. We then like to think, now we know everything we need to know. But you're both making perfect sense to me. So how about your kids? Do you use true crime as a vehicle to discuss things with them? Like, what do they know about your podcast? And, I feel like the 80s and 90s were really different because we watched things like Cops with our parents. In my case, like I was way too young. I feel like we parent differently now. So I'm curious if you have conversations. I don't know the ages of your kids. You can share that if you want. But how are you talking about these things, or are you with them?
My daughter is 11 and my son is 6. And so he knows we have a podcast called Moms and Murder, but you'll never feel weirder about naming a podcast Moms and Murder until a 6-year-old says Moms and Murder. And you're like, oh, should have thought that one through.
Mm-hmm.
But so my son doesn't have any real concept of it, but my daughter does. So she doesn't listen to any stories unless no one dies. She's always like, tell me the next time nobody dies in a story and I want to hear your podcast. So we've had a few of those that she loves. Like the Bling Ring was one of them that she just like listens to. Still to this day, she listens to it a lot. She just enjoys it. So she likes the true crime genre, I guess a little bit. She knows a little bit about it through what we're doing, but she's not interested in any of the harder stuff. I'm not interested in selling her that kind of stuff. I grew up with it, but I don't necessarily think I learned it at an age I was maybe ready for it.
Yeah, it sounds so healthy. She sounds so balanced.
She is so awesome. But yeah, so I don't, we talk like in she's very, very observant, but if we're in what am I trying to say, like a parking lot or something, where I'm saying like, hey, we need to get in the car, right away or whatever. She's very observant and she'll say, oh, did you, see something? I'm like, well, I just, I don't know this area very well or whatever, or I may have seen somebody that, kind of just made me nervous for a second. And, you're like, you don't want to say, hey, this guy that's walking up really, really fast to us is making me scared. You need to get in the car. She's like very aware, she's very like, she'll listen to me on stuff like that. And so, that's kind of, we'll have conversations about, our personal safety and nothing to scare her, but just to keep her aware. It's like a weird line because you don't want to say like, these are the terrible things that happen out there. You want to keep them innocent as long as possible, but also not give them a false sense of security where they're just like, well, nothing's ever going to happen. I'm totally fine all the time, you know?
Ugh,
So
I
it's a
know.
weird line.
Struggle of parenting. Yeah, totally. How about you, Mandy? How old are your children?
So I have two boys, and they are 10 and 7, so very similar ages to Melissa's kids. And my kids could not care less what I do with the podcast. They ask very few questions. They know what it is that I talk about on the podcast, and there was one point where my older son said that he thought it was weird, and I just was like, yeah, it is a little weird, but that was really it. And there are times when my son will come in and ask me, what I'm working on or what is my story about. And so I'll try to explain it in as age appropriate of a way as I can. Of course, I'm going to spare all the terrible details, and I'll just kind of give a basic rundown of what happened. So, they're aware of terrible crimes that happen, and even that people kill each other, and they know that those are things that are out there in the world, and it just kind of is what it is at our house. They don't really ask a lot of questions, and we don't really get in too deep with it. But I've always been kind of a helicopter mom and a very paranoid person, and I'm like Melissa, where I'm always thinking something bad is going to happen to me, or I'm going to just any number of scenarios. I could think of about a million that could happen to me in the next 12 hours. But, and so, but my kids have grown up with me being like that all the time. So just like Melissa, if I say we need to get in the car or we need to hurry up and, get inside or anything like that, they do listen to me because they've grown up with me being like that. They're probably thinking oh, crazy mom is overreacting again. But they still listen, But as far as actually talking to them about heavy crimes, no, I really don't do that very much. I will answer their questions if they ask them, and I'll try to answer them honestly and, without scaring the crap out of them. But yeah, they don't really care that much about what it is that I do, or they don't ask a lot of questions. So I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, I would be too. And I like the strategy of answering questions and not offering information before they're ready. I think that's always a good way to go, because then I'm like, well, then I don't have to think of the thing to say. I'll just wait till they ask. My kids are older now, so I can't really get away with. They also could care less about what I'm doing, including right now, except that they all have to be quiet and not be on their different devices. And we're in New York, so we don't have a huge space. So it's that. They really probably resent what I'm doing, actually, now that I think about it and say it out loud. But a couple of years ago, I was just thinking of this carpool. It was such a funny, because when Melissa, you said that you realized it's a strange thing to hear your little child say, my mom's podcast is Moms and Murder. We were driving in the car. I was driving my youngest, Gabe, home from soccer with a bunch of his friends. And we have an app. I don't know if you guys have it in any cities in Florida, but it's called Citizen. Have you ever heard of the Citizen app? Started in New York, and now it's in LA and San Francisco and a couple other cities. And it's basically just a crowdsourcing crime app. So you get an alert when there's danger in the neighborhood. So if you leave the app running, it kind of does it anywhere you are geographically in the city. So someone like me, both of you would love it / hate it and keep it running all the time. So, and it makes this crazy sound when there's an alert, like ja-joom. So I have my phone up where I have my directions on to get home, but then the little app noise sounds, and the kids kind of were startled, and my youngest was like, oh, that's my mom's crime app. She loves murder. And I was just like, oh dear, I think I've been off the carpool list since. I'm like, I'll be calling both your moms later and explaining. But yeah, there are those moments where you're like, this is weird to kids. When I hear it from their mouths, I'm just like, well, it's not, I don't love, okay, let me explain.
Yeah.
How do I do this? Okay, so the cases you choose, how do you do that? Do you alternate? I would imagine you alternate. And then how has that changed? It sounds like you've tried to mix up the portfolio of cases, if you will. So can you talk a little bit about what you're looking for in a story, and how do you balance lesser known ones with kind of the big ones people get excited about in terms of coverage?
So in the beginning, like we said before, we really didn't have a plan. And so we started off with Casey Anthony, and that was, of course, a really huge popular case. And After that, we kind of decided maybe we don't want to do some of these higher profile cases. We want to stick to some of the more lesser known cases. So I think still to this day, we do every now and then do some of the bigger ones, but it's really not very often. We do try and stick to ones that haven't maybe gotten quite as much coverage as some of the other ones, because at a certain point, the information is already out there. So we don't want to put out a content that people are that we can't bring anything new to the story, or we can't add anything that hasn't already been put out there by somebody else.
Right.
So we do like to stick to the cases that are maybe a little lesser known. As far as the process of choosing them goes, it really comes down to how much information there is available. And there's been cases that we have started to look into that seemed really interesting, and they are interesting. But then when you get into it, you realize that a lot of the sources just have the same information repeated over and over again. And there's just really not a lot of information, and definitely not enough to make a 45-minute to an hour long podcast out of it. So those get counted out, pretty quickly. We were going and picking the ones that just appealed to us for a long time. And then after a while, listeners started requesting episodes and cases that they wanted to hear. People would send us ones from their hometown, or somebody that they knew, a friend or a family member that was killed, and they wanted us to do an episode on it. And that's kind of pretty much what we did for a really long time. Was we just kind of picked cases that came straight from our Facebook group. We had a post that had, people could make suggestions, and that became really where we got the ideas for a lot of our stories for a long time, because that's what people want to hear. So of course we're going to do those, instead of just ones that we randomly saw on a Google search somewhere. And it's always more interesting to do the ones that people have sent us. And I always love when people send us information. They write us like a whole bunch of paragraphs about the story, and they kind of tell us about it first. And so, yeah, I like doing those. So now it's kind of listener based. Like, we kind of do the ones that people suggest to us. Of course, there's still ones that Melissa will be like, oh, you know what? I remember this one story that I, heard about so long ago, and I think it would make a great episode. And then we'll kind of go from there. And now we also are working with one of our really good friends in podcasting, Haley Gray, and she does research for a lot of different podcasts. And so we've been working with her, and she gives us some research, and then I take her research and I turn around and write an episode from her research, and I kind of go through her sources myself so I can make sure I have a good grasp on the case. And that's kind of our process now, and we're just comfortable with that process, and it works for us. And I don't really see, I don't see that changing anytime soon, kind of the way that we pick cases. It's kind of, we have a lot to choose from now. Melissa has done a really good job at making a whole spreadsheet of cases that we choose from, and she has vetted them all and makes sure they don't have any kids involved, and that there's enough information and it's not terribly gruesome, because, that's something that we stick away from on our show. So now we kind of have a system and a list that we work off, and that's much easier than how we were doing it in the beginning, where we were just trying to just find any case that seemed interesting, and we didn't really have a system. And so, so now it's so much better that we have like a master sheet that we can look at and say, we're going to do this one next, or this is the one that we're going to ask, Haley to help us with next. And that's been really, really helpful. But most of those have come from listeners suggesting those cases.
Oh, that's ideal. I mean, to have sort of, it's like the Citizen app. It's crowdsourcing the crime for you. It's putting it all right there for you guys to tap into. How long would you say each episode takes in terms of research, writing, prep, and then recording? And do you guys have a workflow, pretty strict schedule? I would think you probably do, given life with kids, but I don't know.
Yeah. So from really early in the podcast, we kind of fell into our roles with the show. And so Melissa has always really done the more clerical and businessy side of things, and she also edits the show. And so then my role was always doing the research and writing the episodes themselves. So, but now that we have Haley working with us doing the research, I don't know how she gets it done as fast as she does. She is actually an actual miracle worker. She will send us like 23 pages of research, and she always writes on top how many hours she spent on it. And she has done this in like 8 hours. And I'm just like, how did you do all this and find all this information in 8 hours, and she's great. And I just love her. And she just gets every piece of information you could think of. I mean, she's never missed anything. And, but when I was doing it, it would take me forever. And I guess maybe because I did have kids at home most of the time, and it was just a lot harder for me to sit down and actually focus for hours at a time.
Yeah.
And so it would take me a full 7 days by the time I researched everything. And then I sat down to write. So now it's gotten down a little bit easier. It takes me about 2 days, like full working days of going through her research and learning the case myself and then writing the episode in my own words. I kind of break it up now into 2 or 3 days. And then sometimes I feel like that's a little bit rushed, but I feel like that's about my average just to actually write the episode out. And then I spend the rest of my time just doing various other things. We both are really active on social media, and you know how it is. There's a million different things you have to do when you have a podcast. So we kind of just break up the jobs like that. But I think the 2 main ones, the editing and the show writing, we've kind of broken those up, and then we share all the rest of the stuff together.
That's a lot of time per episode. I don't do a case every week. I do an interview. So I prep and research the person, the people, and if they've made a show, I watch the show. If they're podcasters, I've usually already listened to their show, but I brush up on that. But it's such a different animal to research a case and to do that well and not plagiarize and not give misinformation. I mean, there's so much you have to think about. So I'm glad you guys have such a good working system. 5 stars.
Yeah. It works, and it's so helpful now with like Mandy was saying, just in the choosing of the cases. So it feels like before it always felt like we were like up against the gun all the time. Just
right.
every week it was like, how are we going to do this? And then it would happen, and then you couldn't take a deep breath because the next week it was already, coming in. And so it's so helpful now. We're having with Haley researching, and Mandy is such a good writer. And Mandy knows our tone and how it makes sense for us to talk. So it sounds very conversational, even whenever we're mostly, reading and stuff. And so it's worked out well. Like I'm a planner, so I like how we kind of do it, and it helps me to know Mandy. I know Mandy has it under control. She knows the stuff I have under control, and there's, all the nonsense stuff that comes with it. Not nonsense, but there's like really good things, but then there's, ads and writing and keeping up with all that stuff with it. It's a lot of moving pieces that you would never know if you weren't doing it. Like, because whenever I listen, I'm like, I feel like I know I do a lot, but it doesn't feel like it. Like if you just describe my task, it's like editing and whatever. You know what I mean?
Oh my
like,
gosh,
not
editing.
In a bad way, like because Mandy, like writing is a monster, and so it's just like a lot of these big pieces that people don't understand, and I understand because I didn't get it either.
Right.
It's just
that's
it's
the
a
magic
good problem to have.
Yeah, it is, and that's the magic of podcasting. Like, I definitely don't think, an audience wants to know how hard it is. And they probably don't even want to know how long it takes to research. I'm just asking because I'm a podcaster. And I like lifting the veil a little bit for my listeners. I do think they like that in my case. But generally, you listen to something or you watch something and you just kind of want the magic of it. You don't want all the nuts and bolts, but it frees you guys up, this great system you have to both do what you're good at. And then you both can kind of freely do the show. And that's what people respond to. So that's awesome.
Yeah. I wrote one episode, and Mandy will tell you it was like a telenovela. It was so dramatic and terrible. I was like, never let me do this again.
Oh
my gosh. That's not my thing. I can write jokes and stuff, but I accidentally turn things into jokes. I'm like, I can't do murder as jokes. This is terrible. So it works out a lot better the way we've got it going.
Yeah, I mean, it's like know thyself, right? And many people can't edit. I've decided when I started the show, I'm like, I'm paying an editor. I know me. I know I'll get frustrated. I'll probably quit because of it. Like I won't be consistent or I won't meet my deadlines. So that was just something I knew to do. This is all about the Enneagram, honestly. It's like knowing who you are, play to your strengths, so you can thrive and be your best self. That's really, actually, that last part is not really what I believe the Enneagram is about, but it is about knowing yourself and kind of working with what you have, I always think, gosh, we should do a podcast on the Enneagram. I'm so obsessed with it, but I think
too.
It's right. I just could read and talk about it all day, but I do think what's interesting about the Enneagram for people who don't care about the Enneagram is that what I like about it is you kind of find out what's really unique and special and great about you and how that thing could sort of also take you down if you're not healthy or connected, So I always think it's really good information for people. I think it's so helpful. But anyway, switching gears back to yeah, thank you. I would love to know who, I know you don't interview people a lot. In fact, I'm trying to think of any episodes I remember you talking to people, and there is someone whose name I cannot remember that I remember you guys interviewing someone. Blonde.
We had
Sweeney?
Ali Sweeney. Yes,
Yeah,
Ali
that's,
Sweeney. She's
I
awesome.
couldn't get her first name. Yes. So you don't do interviews a lot, but I'm wondering, do each of you have a dream guest? If you were to do a show where you brought in somebody else, and let's keep it in like maybe one true crime person and one not true crime person, if that's fun.
That's perfect because I only put a non-true crime
Oh,
person.
good, good.
So
And you don't have to have a true crime person. It's fine.
perfect. Okay. Mandy,
So-
who do you have?
I have no one. I do not like having guests on our show
Oh.
because I get so nervous and I just do not
I'm
know how
with
to
you.
act, and then I act a fool and I don't know, and then it's like I'm doing a whole different show than what I actually even do because I'm not acting like myself because I'm so terribly nervous, especially when you're talking to someone like Ali Sweeney. It's like it doesn't even matter. Like we've been doing this for 3 years, but even if Ali Sweeney would come back onto our show for the third time, I would still be like, I would just be, floundering and not really knowing how to act or what to say. And I don't know if it comes across in those episodes, but we are both so nervous when we talk to anybody else on our show. Doesn't matter how well we know them or how much preparation we've had. It just doesn't matter. So I don't want anybody on the show. And if anyone wants to come on the show, they can, but just be prepared that I am not.
With that kind of introduction?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that is not an invitation that anyone is gonna
Oh my God.
take you up on. But I
Don't
love
want you
it.
here.
Yeah,
I will be sick to my stomach, but I guess come.
it'll be
I
the
don't
worst
know.
show ever. I love that you just said no. I love that you're like, I do not have an answer to that. I will not assign a name to that answer. That's
No.
I honestly could not appreciate that answer more. It's so good. Melissa, I know you have somebody, and it's not true crime, so now I'm tempted to guess.
Go ahead.
Can I guess? Okay, I'll be wrong, but I feel like I would have a sense of maybe who in the world it might be. But is it a guy or a woman or a man?
It's a guy.
Okay. Okay, I actually don't feel, I don't really have a person, but I'm just wondering, would it be like an SNL actor? Like
See, that's so good. That's who I should have picked. Like, as you were saying, like, I bet I know. I'm like, I bet she thinks it's going to be an SNL person because I am obsessed with all, like, things in the comedy genre.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah.
like, totally my wheelhouse. I was thinking, and this doesn't make any sense, but I am obsessed with Tony Hale from Arrested Development and
Ugh.
Veep. He's amazing and he seems so kind, and I've heard him on other podcasts, so I know he does it, and I know he's married and his wife is a mom, and there's a chance that they could be into true crime. So that's a roundabout way, but I'm just obsessed with him. He's from my hometown, which I know people say that and you're like, oh my gosh, nobody cares, but nobody's from Tallahassee. So he's from Tallahassee, and I just think he's like the nicest, funniest person, and I love everything he's in, and it has nothing to do with true crime, but that's my dream.
No,
But
I
would like T-Pain from Tallahassee, Melissa?
I love
Sorry?
say that again, Mandy.
Isn't T-Pain from Tallahassee?
Okay, T-Pain, yes, he's the other one. But like T-Pain, I don't even know if I could get through that interview because I don't know enough about his stuff. I just know that he is a private child.
I'm just
We have
envisioning
two brides, and he's
T-Pain,
one of them.
yeah, on Moms and Murder, and I'm like, yeah, that would be a departure. That would be fun. Tony Hale.
Can we get auto-tune for the whole episode?
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
That's amazing. Tony Hale is a great answer. So I have two fun Tony Hale stories, and maybe you'll be the third. I don't know. I'm kind of feeling like you put this out there and it's going to happen now. So I didn't know he's from Tallahassee, so now I know that. That doesn't mean anything, but that's interesting, and I do think people like that hometown connection, especially when it's somewhere, like you don't meet people from Tallahassee every day, or I don't. Okay, so Tony Hale went to my brother's bar, like peak Arrested Development in Philadelphia. And my brother said he was the coolest, nicest, most down to earth. They talked, but about life. They had, as you do at bars, but not always actors, who are well known. So he was super vulnerable and just very sweet. So there was that story. And then my
I
friend,
can barely breathe.
oh, sorry.
This is too much for me
I
already.
feel like it's like early Christmas. And then my second story is, so I have a friend who used to be the web producer for SNL. So he would produce all the clips like that you would see on
Oh my gosh.
NBC.com later. I know. So I got to go to the show live a few times. I know.
Please,
I know.
Rebecca, I can't do this anymore.
We've lost Melissa. We've
You're living
lost
my
her.
life.
Well, I wish he still had that job. He doesn't, but it was sort of like some of my highlight moments. But he kind of has met him in, they're not friends, but he's met him. But he asked him to be on this like Christmas TV special he produced this last holiday season, and he said no. His people said no. And then my friend Chris was just like, I just believe Tony Hill is supposed to be in it. And he literally runs smack into him in Times Square. Production had already started. And he was like, Tony, he's like, my name is whatever. I don't want to out my friend. And he was like, hey, yeah, like he clearly didn't know him, but was being very gracious. And my friend was like, I'm doing that holiday special that you said no to. And he was like, oh my gosh, that's yours. It sounds amazing. I'm really sorry I couldn't. He's like, totally cool, but you still could actually. And he was like, yeah, no, I couldn't. So he said no again, but was so kind about it. So those are my two Tony Hill stories. So I feel like you're right. Your instinct about him, he's kind. I think he's really a cool guy. Apparently very busy, but
he knows like his boundaries. So now I'm screwed. He's never going to say yes. I was hoping that would end with him being the star of it, and like he would totally say yes to doing it.
I know,
and Mandy wouldn't even be on the episode because she just refuses to have guests now.
It would just be the
I
Melissa
just have a
and
question
Tony
for
show.
both of you.
Yes. Okay.
Oh,
She's
no.
like, oh no, are you going to say who's Tony Hill?
She's going to say, am I supposed to know who this is?
That's exactly what I'm going to say. I have no idea who that is.
Okay.
Mandy? I can't do this anymore, Rebecca. This is where our show ends. Like our actual Moms and Murder ends.
This is really a lot of fun for me because I've heard this moment play out on your show so many times, and now I'm in it, and it's fun. So, okay, Tony Hill is Buster Bluth from Arrested Development, the TV show.
I mean,
And
I still don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, you'll text her, Melissa will text you a picture of him after this, and you'll know immediately who he is, I think. Don't you think she'll know when she sees him?
Rebecca, I really appreciate your confidence, but no, I don't think she's going to know who he is. I 100% don't think she will.
So now,
in the nicest way. I mean that in the nicest way. Somebody will take that as me being mean, but I mean it in the nicest way.
I love it because Mandy's like, this is why I don't have guests on because I am not interested and I don't know who they are and this is not fun. Yeah. No, I think.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine if Melissa like pulled that off and got this person on the show and I'm just like, no, I don't know who you are.
You would just have to take a month of your life and watch his two shows and that'd be the best month of your life. Honestly, he's really, really fun to watch. But no, as I was telling that Christmas story, I did realize like this is anticlimactic because it really had all the makings for like a Christmas moment in New York City where he's like, sure, I'll be in your show. And then it snows or something. But no, he just politely declined.
Yeah, he just grabs his phone and calls his people and it's like, let me be on his show. I need to be on his show. Like, no, he just said no again.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a Melissa story.
Oh, seriously. But hey, you never know. Stranger things have happened. So, okay, I want to know if there's a case you're both following individually or together right now that's kind of playing out currently. I know it's been weird. The news has been so hijacked by coronavirus. There are a couple cases I was following. Actually, the trials stopped because they're not going to court and stuff.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. But are there any you're following now or were following right before this happened?
One I'm following, but it's not really current. It's actually older, but we covered the story. Mandy will remember the Jessica Curran case. And that one has to do with a conviction several years ago, but they're still going through the process of trying to have appeals. So to me, that's current. But where this one young mother is killed and her boyfriend is going on trial, her ex-boyfriend, the baby's father, and the judge ended up throwing the whole trial out because like it's been so mishandled the entire time. It's like an officer's first murder case, like everything is going wrong. Then they end up arresting like, I can't remember if it's 5 or 6 people. All of them go on trial. They have no connection to each other. One of them knew the other one at school, like through a brother, that little of a connection. And the idea was they all killed this girl. They all got together one night, killed this girl and dumped her body. And there's no DNA evidence. There's nothing, pointing at any of these people. And so a few of them ended up getting an Alford plea, and they, say they're innocent and there's nothing to tie them there. And then the one guy, Quincy Cross, is in prison now and working on appeals. And it's just one of those, and Jessica's parents think the wrong person was arrested. So there's just, for some reason, that whole story drew me in because it just felt like there's no justice for anyone in this family.
Right.
And where it just breaks your heart, and you just hope that like he can get a new trial. I don't know his innocence or guilt, but it doesn't feel like there was ever a fair trial in that. And it just, I don't know, I watched all these like cable access shows about it. I just got really deep into it and just thought how scary it is that you could go to trial for something because they had like a Facebook page, or I'm sorry, a MySpace page, and two girls said, these are the people that did it. And they later said, hey, the police told me that I needed to say that if I wanted to keep my kids. One of those situations where you're
Oh
like,
my
how
gosh.
is any of this? Yeah, just nothing made any sense. So I don't know. I really just want to see a retrial there, or something. It just doesn't feel right to me, and it bugs me, and it just breaks my heart for both families because you just don't know the truth.
Yeah, where is this happening? Where does this take place?
That was in it's in Kentucky.
Okay.
I can't remember the town right offhand. It's Mayfield, Kentucky. It's a very small town, and the
Okay.
dad was like a fire chief. So I mean, it just doesn't add up. I'm not saying my opinion really one way or the other. I kind of am, but I just feel like they just need to look more into it, and I hope they do. It just, I don't know, it
Yeah.
just really tugs at my heart.
Oh, that sounds rough, and it does sound like something was off from the beginning. So that I want to look that one up. That's interesting. Mandy, how
Yeah.
about you? Are you following anything right now?
I'm really not. I don't. It's actually kind of interesting since we've been doing the podcast and since I, am writing the episodes and then we're recording our, our show. I kind of find like that mentally I just disconnect from true crime
Yeah.
outside of the show that we're doing. And so I don't spend a lot of time seeking out other true crime sources because that's all I'm doing all week long
Yeah.
anyways. I'm reading research on a case and then I'm writing about that case and then we're talking about the case for an hour when we're recording. And so for that week, that's all my brain can handle as far as crime goes, And so I feel like I don't listen to as many podcasts. I don't really watch Dateline as much anymore. I don't get really heavily invested in ongoing stories. There are some that do get my attention and I will kind of follow along with them, but I just kind of sometimes I feel like I should be spending my time researching whatever case I'm working on for our show and not spending time on this like leisure or, you know what I'm saying? Not that I don't enjoy it still, I do, but I just kind of find I've taken a step back from taking in more than what I like necessarily need to at the time.
Yeah.
And since we do
It's
a
hard to
true
consume
crime
all the
podcast, I
time.
feel like I get a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes we reach a saturation point, and I actually find it comforting when I hit that because I'm like, oh, I have one. That's good. Like, because I wasn't sure for a while. I could read, watch, listen 24/7, around work and life, of course. But when I started making the show, I noticed my podcast listening went down a little bit. And since coronavirus, honestly, my bandwidth for true crime has actually decreased.
Right.
Which I guess actually makes sense, but I thought I would lose myself more into the stories, but I'm actually seeking different kinds of content. What are you guys watching during this? Are your watching habits changed, or what's like one standout thing you've watched?
I am
Obviously,
a
Tiger
TV
King.
person.
Wait,
What'd you say?
say it
Oh,
again.
Obviously, Tiger King.
Oh, yeah. I heard you guys discuss
Tiger King for sure.
Tiger King. I had to watch it because when the whole country is talking about something, it's just
Right.
I'm like I can't not participate in this dialogue, if you will. So I did watch that. Any others? I mean, if that's it, that's understandable, frankly.
I'm a comfort watcher, so I do a lot of The Office, Parks and Rec, like things I've watched over and over again. They're just kind of like that's another soothing. Apparently, I need to be soothed all the time and should maybe get a pacifier at this point. But I am loving the two things that I've really watched recently. Have you seen or on Netflix Middleditch and Schwartz? They have they're an improv comedy
No,
team. Yeah.
no.
So They're so good. You'll see that one of the guys is from Silicon Valley, and the other one is from Parks and Rec and other things. You've seen him in other things, but they do a three episode of just like their live shows, their improv, just from beginning to end, taking an audience members. I mean, you know how improv works, but taking their story, like a little about their lives, and making this entire thing. And it brought me so much joy because it amazes me. They play all these characters, and it's the coolest thing in the world. And then I just started watching the Detroiters. I said that like I was a computer. The Detroiters.
That is a weird word to say because it doesn't feel real.
It does not roll off your tongue. That's hilarious. That's with Tim Robinson and, oh my gosh, who plays on Veep? Oh gosh, the guy that ends up becoming president. Oh gosh,
actually just started
Richard
Veep.
Black.
Okay.
Oh,
I've never
so
watched
good.
Veep
But
until
anyways,
this
they're
week.
hilarious.
I've never heard of these.
Oh.
I'm so excited. I'm like,
Yeah.
that sounds like where I'm at in terms of my headspace. Like
Yes.
I need to laugh. I need some levity. Love comedy. Those sound really good.
Yeah, you'll enjoy them. They're both a lot of fun. But yeah, Veep, oh my goodness, that's one of my absolute favorite shows. And the ending you'll love. I don't know, there's a lot to feel. Oh, I'm having so many feelings. There's one episode of Veep, and I will stop talking, in like the 4th season, and it's the most like the episode of any show I will watch over and over again because it just brings me. It's hilarious from beginning to end.
I love episodes like that. I will let you know after I'm done with the 4th season. I'm just
Yes.
starting, so I will circle back on that.
Oh, please do, yeah.
Mandy, how about you? What are you watching to give yourself a little respite from the true crime?
To tell you the truth,
Tiger
Rebecca,
King.
I don't really want to go on the record and say that I don't watch TV one more time because I'm afraid Melissa is going to disown me. So yeah, I do not watch television really. I do every now and then. I recently I texted Melissa a few nights ago and told her that I was so bored that I was turning on Married at First Sight, which is one of Melissa's my favorite shows ever. So I actually binge watched like a whole season of that, and then that was enough for me. I put that away. I put that to the side. But that's really the only thing I've watched, I feel like, in the last like 6 weeks that I've actually dedicated time to sit down and watch this whole season of this show. But typically I just don't. I don't know what it is. I don't know why. I wish I liked watching TV more.
I need you to find
don't
a show.
enjoy it.
It's so sad, but no, not what you said. What I'm thinking, which is,
it is.
But then what do you do? Like, that's what I'm thinking. How lame, and what does that say about my life? Like, what do you do?
She must do like actual things. I'm always asking her that. I'm like, then what are you doing? Because to me, I'm like, the end of the night, my kids are down. I'm like, if I'm working on something, if I can have something in the background, like obviously editing, you can't, but if I'm working on something else, I just want like noise and like a dumb story playing behind the things. I want Real Housewives throwing wine glasses.
Oh my gosh.
All that.
Yeah.
It's so good.
No, but good on you, Mandy, for clearing your brain for other things. I'm impressed.
I mean, it's not really. I don't know. It's not really. It's not really. I think a lot of it too for me is like sometimes I'll turn on something on TV with good intentions of just sitting down and watching TV, and then I just get distracted. I'll get on my phone. I will check, something on my emails. And then all of a sudden, next thing I know, I have no clue what I've been watching this entire time. And it just becomes a hassle for me to go back and rewind and catch up. And so then I just give up and I just go find something else to do because clearly I'm not watching television.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah, it's an attention span thing. I get it. I do other things while I watch too. And there's some things I can watch at like high level, medium level, low level. But see, that's how important watching TV is to me, that I've identified like what I can do while watching it. It's really sad. Okay, one thing I always ask my guests before they go is, what is keeping you up at night? So if you could both tell me that. I'm intrigued.
Quite literally, yeah, quite literally all the caffeine I'm drinking every day. I am drinking Diet Coke. I'll drink a Diet Coke at 11 at night. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, go to bed. But then, I don't know. I've picked up another show that I've got in the background and I'm doing the dishes, and you got to get through your dishes, and you got to know if Sonya's going to, flash her hoo-ha on national television on Real Housewives of New York. I don't know. She's 100%. If there's a pool, her hoo-ha is out. And so you just got to see what's going to happen next. So I drink way too much caffeine, and I don't have a great sleep system. at 36. It's just sporadic and I stay up a lot and it's caffeine. And no, I'm very happy. I get to watch all my shows.
Oh, okay.
It's totally fine with
It's
me.
working for you. Okay.
She sounds
Not
really
well,
happy,
but it's
doesn't
working.
Yeah, you sound
I'm good.
rested and content. Yes,
she?
definitely.
Yeah.
Mandy, what about you?
I mean, I feel like right now, of course, all the uncertainty about the world we're living in and what's going to happen over the next few weeks and months and, even for the rest of this year, there's a little bit of nervousness, surrounding even my husband's job and everything. And we're all fine right now, but it's just kind of that uncharted territory that I lay in bed at night and think about like all the possible scenarios of the outcomes and, what life could look like for us in, say like 3 months from now and how that's going to affect my family and my immediate family and me and everything. And so it definitely, I feel like those kind of things have been weighing a little heavier on me. But I mean, no, I feel like I actually sleep pretty good, which I don't mean to be like saying that in like a, look at me, I'm so like happy that I sleep well at night kind of thing. But I really do.
No, it's a beautiful thing. It's all the
That's
TV
why
you're
you
not
watch
watching.
TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you watch TV, you block out all these things. So your brain is like, I can't take in all of this and worry about everything around the clock. So then it fights for dominance. And that's where, old SNL sketches come into play. You just keep playing it until you drown everything else out.
That sounded scientific. I believe everything you said.
Maybe I should try that.
Well, you both are doing a great job, and I love your show, and I'm really thankful that you would be on mine. I really am. Do you remember when we met last year at CrimeCon? You might not.
I do.
Absolutely.
Oh, you do? Oh, that's
Yes.
okay.
No, I do.
I
Mhm.
remember I had to
I was so excited.
Oh, I was too, and I hate those things though where you have to go up and start the conversation. But once you start, it's fine. But it's just I'm gonna go do this now. So
I know.
Will you guys go in October? Fingers crossed that life is back to normal.
We should be there. Yeah. It's here, so that makes it a lot easier for us as well.
You guys can be like the ringleaders and the tour guides.
Oh gosh. No.
I will tell you to watch TV in your room. That's about all I'm going to tell you to do.
It's as wild as I'm going to get. I'll maybe try the pool out. Yeah, definitely some hotel TV watching, which is my favorite kind of TV watching.
Exactly.
Well, thank you both so much, and I hope you stay healthy and safe during this weird time. And thank you so much for being on Dialogue.
Thank you. Take care.